They are the silent companions of all things that exist.
You know, when I read that in one of the sources you sent, it really made me stop and think.
It's true, though, isn't it?
Yeah, we see shadows every single day, but like, how often do we really think about them?
Right.
What they are, where they come from, all that. And then you sent in all these sources about shadows in art and psychology,
Mhm.
even physics. And it's like, wow, there's a whole world there.
It's fascinating, yeah.
So today we're going on a deep dive into shadows from, you know, like the basic science to how they show up in art, movies, even in our minds,
Should be interesting.
for sure. So before we get all philosophical and stuff, let's start with the basics. What actually is a shadow, like
Okay.
scientifically speaking?
Well, the simplest explanation is that a shadow forms when something blocks light,
Okay.
but it's not just the absence of light.
Right.
There's this interaction happening between the light and the object, and that's what creates the shape of the shadow. I see. And speaking of shapes, I was looking at that Wikipedia article you sent, and apparently there are different kinds of shadows.
Oh, yeah, there are.
Umbra, penumbra. I even saw something called antumbra. It's like a whole shadow family.
It sounds complicated, but it's all about the size of the light source and where you're looking at it from. The umbra, that's the darkest part of the shadow where the light's totally blocked.
Like in a total solar eclipse.
Exactly. The moon's umbra falls on the Earth. Then you have the penumbra. That's the fuzzy edge where the light's only partially blocked.
I was
So
thinking.
like during a partial eclipse. And the antumbra, well, that's where things get kind of weird.
How so?
If you could stand in the antumbra of a solar eclipse, you'd see a ring of light around the moon.
No way. I never knew that. So you've got this everyday thing, a shadow, but it's got all this complexity going on.
Yeah.
And then you look at how shadows have been used in art, like with chiaroscuro.
Chiaroscuro, yeah. Light dark from the
Yeah.
Italian. It's this technique artists use to create depth and realism by playing with light and shadow.
And it totally changes how we see things, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's like a visual language all its own.
And when you see it in the work of those master painters like Caravaggio, Rembrandt,
Yeah.
their paintings are like almost like little stage productions with the light and shadow creating these really intense scenes.
Exactly. Think of something like The Calling of St. Matthew by Caravaggio. The light's coming from this one specific spot, and it falls right on Christ and Matthew's faces,
Oh, I see.
like a spotlight drawing your attention to that moment. And the rest of the scene, pretty much darkness.
It's like he's directing your attention to the story he wants to tell, just with light.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff.
But you know what's amazing is that chiaroscuro didn't stop with painting. It made its way into film, too.
Right, big time. Filmmakers figured out pretty quickly that light and shadow could set the mood, create an atmosphere.
Yeah.
Those early German expressionist films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, they use chiaroscuro to make these really unsettling, kind of distorted worlds.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that one. The sets, the lighting, it all felt so cough in a way that really stuck with you.
Right. And then you have a film like Citizen Kane, which totally revolutionized how chiaroscuro was used in Hollywood.
Oh, yeah, Orson Welles.
Orson Welles and his cinematographer, Greg Toland, they used deep focus and low-key lighting, these extreme camera angles. It was like inventing a whole new visual language for movies.
So from these Renaissance paintings to these dark psychological thrillers, it's the same technique, but with a completely different feel.
Pretty cool how it evolved, yeah.
But it's not just about the external world, right? Shadows are a big deal in psychology, too.
We're talking about the shadow self, right? Carl Jung's idea.
Yeah, that hidden side of our personality, the stuff we try to ignore or push down. It's like the opposite of our conscious self, right?
Think about it this way. Just like light creates a shadow, our awareness, our conscious mind, creates a shadow self.
Okay.
The more we focus on one side of ourselves, the more that opposite side falls into the shadows.
So basically, we're all walking around with these shadow selves, affecting how we think and act without us even realizing it.
In a way, yeah. And Jung believed that really knowing our shadow selves, integrating them, that's key to growing as a person.
Makes sense.
And it's not about saying that negative things are okay. It's about understanding and accepting all parts of yourself.
Kind of like how a painting needs both light and shadow to really work.
Exactly. We need both our light and dark sides to be whole.
It's like we're peeling back these layers, from the science of shadows to how they show up in art. And now we're getting into the psychology of it all. But you also sent in some philosophy stuff, and that's where things get really interesting to me.
Ah, you must be talking about Plato.
Yeah, Plato's allegory of the cave, that one really got me thinking.
It's a classic for sure, using shadows to explore how we see reality, what we think is real.
Right. It's about these prisoners stuck in a cave their whole lives. All they ever see are these shadows on the wall from objects passing in front of a fire.
And they think those shadows are the real world
Exactly. They have no idea there's anything else out there.
until one of them escapes.
And at first, he's totally blinded by the sunlight.
Of course, he's never seen actual sunlight before.
Yeah.
But then his eyes adjust, and he sees the world for what it really is.
And he goes back to tell the others, right?
Tries to. But they don't believe him. They think he's crazy.
Because they're so used to their shadow world, they can't even imagine anything different.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, how much of what WE think is real is just our own limited view.
It's a powerful metaphor for sure. Our perception can be so limited by our own experiences.
And that brings us to, well, this is going to sound kind of wild. Shadow semiotics.
Ah, yes. Shadow semiotics.
Okay, I'm going to need some help with this one. What exactly is shadow semiotics?
Think about it this way. Semiotics, that's the study of signs, symbols, how we make meaning. Shadow semiotics, it takes that idea and applies it to the whole universe. It suggests that a lot of what we observe scientifically, it might just be shadows of a deeper reality. We see the effects, but not the actual thing itself.
So kind of like those prisoners, mistaking shadows for the real deal. But instead of firelight, it's our scientific instruments that are casting the shadows.
Exactly. A perfect example is dark matter and dark energy.
Right, most of the universe is made of that stuff, but we can't see it.
We only know it's there because of how it affects things we can see.
Like gravity and how the universe is expanding.
Right. It's like we're seeing the footprints of something huge, but we haven't actually seen the creature making those footprints.
It makes you wonder what else is out there that we're missing, right? What other shadows are shaping our reality without us even knowing?
And it's not just about the universe out there either. Remember Jung's idea of the shadow self?
Yeah.
We might be projecting shadows onto ourselves too, creating stories about who we are that are based on, well, a limited understanding.
So just like those prisoners, we might be misinterpreting parts of ourselves, pushing things into the darkness without even knowing it.
Precisely. And that's where it gets really interesting, really personal,
Hmm.
because we have the opportunity to become more aware of those shadows, to integrate them and get a fuller picture of who we really are.
Okay, so we've gone from literal shadows to shadows in art and film, and now to these psychological, even philosophical shadows. I'm starting to see this pattern, like there's always more going on beneath the surface. It's like in one of the articles you sent, it was talking about how we tend to project our own shadow selves onto other people. We see the qualities we've rejected in ourselves, but in other people.
Oh yeah, that's classic projection.
Right. But could that connect to shadow semiotics too?
How do you mean?
Like, are we projecting those shadows, those limitations, not just onto ourselves, but onto how we understand the whole universe?
Ooh, that's interesting. So it's not just about misinterpreting parts of ourselves, but maybe misinterpreting reality itself.
Yeah. It's almost like those prisoners in the cave are a metaphor not just for human perception in general, but for our own individual caves, the shadows we create by not being fully self-aware.
I like that. So then the question becomes, how do we break free? How do we step out of that cave of our own projections and see things more clearly?
Well, Jung said the first step is awareness, right?
Huh?
Recognizing that we have a shadow self, that we all have those hidden parts.
Definitely. But then what do we do with that awareness? How do we integrate those shadows? It's not like it just happens overnight.
It's got to be a process, right? Like that escaped prisoner, it's probably disorienting at first. Facing those parts of ourselves we've been hiding from, it can't be easy.
No, it's not. It could be painful even. But those shadows, they hold important information about who we are.
They're not bad in themselves, they're just parts of us.
Exactly. And I think Jung said it really well. He said, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. For no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. Yeah. And he goes on, to become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real.
So it's about taking responsibility, owning those darker impulses instead of pretending they're not there.
Exactly. And recognizing that we have a choice in how we respond to them. It's not about getting rid of the shadow. It's about understanding it, integrating it, maybe even using that shadow energy in a positive way.
Okay, so we're not trying to erase those parts of ourselves. We're trying to learn from them, make them part of the whole picture.
Right. And that's where the real growth happens. When we can accept all of who we are, the light and the shadow, we can experience life more fully, more authentically.
And maybe by understanding our own inner shadows, we can start to see the universe around us differently too.
I think so,
Yeah.
because how we see the world is always going to be shaped by how we see ourselves.
This has been such an amazing deep dive. We started with a simple question, what is a shadow? And we ended up talking about everything from physics to psychology, even philosophy. I never realized how much there was to say about shadows.
Right. They're so much more profound than we usually give them credit for.
It makes me think about that quote from one of the sources you sent, the one called Shadows, the Silent Companions of All Things That Exist.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, they really are always there, aren't they? Lurking just beneath the surface. And maybe by learning to embrace those shadows, to see them as part of the whole, we can appreciate the beauty and complexity of, well, everything, both ourselves and the universe. So, to everyone listening, next time you see a shadow, take a second to think about what it might be trying to tell you, what's it reflecting, what's it hiding, and what might it be revealing about the world around you and indeed the world within.